Good afternoon, everybody. Hey, welcome to our community of practice this afternoon. We're so glad that you could make it here. Welcome to the alternative approaches to substance use disorder treatment community of practice that's being sponsored and facilitated by the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services and also by Growth Partners, the New Hampshire Technical Assistance Center. We're delighted you can make it. We're going to go through a couple of points of housekeeping before we get started on our community of practice this afternoon, and a few helpful reminders, and then we'll get into the program. So we want to remind everybody that we are recording today's meeting so that this recording can be available for everybody afterwards. We'd like to ask you to keep muted during the program. There will come a time later when you'll have the opportunity to offer questions, but until that time, we'd ask that you keep yourself muted. If you have any internet connectivity issues during this session, you could try turning off your video camera, perhaps try joining by phone and see if that improves things. Or if you're having any trouble hearing, if you take a look at your Zoom screen on the bottom left-hand corner next to your unmute button, you'll see an arrow and you can choose a speaker to see if you can improve your sound quality at all. What we would love is for you to be fully engaged throughout this community of practice. So we invite you to use the emoticons tool that you have underneath your reactions bar, and that will help you convey emotions virtually. We're going to be using the chat function today, excuse me, so that you can post any questions. When you direct your questions, what we would ask is that you direct your questions to the participant that is named Q&A Rumiana, and she'll be able to compile your questions and put them to our speakers after each of their presentations. One thing that we would like to mention is to respect everybody's privacy here. We'd like you to bear in mind that if you put a question in the chat, that question will be read out loud. So we'd like to ask you to avoid any personal questions or anything that you wouldn't feel comfortable having on a recording after this event is over. So to give you a bit of a run through of our community of practice today, we're going to listen to 3 different presentations of people with lived experience and expertise in alternative approaches to substance use disorder treatment. Each presentation will last approximately 20 minutes, and then we'll have about 3 minutes afterwards in which we can post some of your questions to our presenter. So once again, you can write those questions to the participant named Q&A Rumiana. After the 3 presentations, we'll have an opportunity for you to maybe come on camera or turn your microphone on and ask any remaining questions that you might have. And perhaps the most exciting part of this whole event is we're going to hold a raffle at the end. So 3 of you lucky people will be the receivers of a gift. So I encourage you to stay for the duration of this event. So with that, we'll move on and we'll introduce Chrissy, who's going to talk to us about the objectives of this COP.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Chrissy Nikitas. I'm one of the contract managers over at the Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services. I think I've spoken or emailed with at least most of you here. So welcome. Thank you for coming. My partner here is Rumiana Radzova. She's also in the clinical services unit of the Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services. Her pronouns are she, her, as are mine. And so she'll be working in the background, grabbing all of your questions during the presenters today. Without taking any more time away from our awesome presenters, I just quickly wanted to go over why we're here today. We're going to be meeting with 3 extraordinary individuals who have either accessed or worked directly in medication-assisted treatment, MAT, and harm reduction. We're super grateful to have them share their experiences and stories with us. And, all of this in an effort to bring more light and resources to the MAT and harm reduction community here in New Hampshire. So next slide, please. All right, so before we jump in, we wanted to get a quick temperature check on where everyone's thoughts and feelings about MAT and harm reduction. There are no wrong answers, no silly answers, anything like that. So either everyone break out their phone or go ahead and enter the site and that code that it will ask you for right there. And we'll give everyone a few minutes to enter in some words or phrases, some of the first things you think of when you hear MAT or harm reduction. Oh, I love it. The words are getting bigger. People are thinking along the same lines. All right, we'll give folks just another few seconds here. All right, so let's say I don't see anybody typing on the top here, so I'm going to start. It looks like we've got compassionate care and safe. That's awesome. Effective, reduce harm, hope, meeting people where they're at. Love that. Successful, alive, recovery, evidence-based. Yes, yes, love it, love it. Those are all fantastic. So yes, we just wanted to get a quick temperature check, see where everybody was at. These are all great and an awesome start to the presentations today. So without further ado, let's go to the next slide and I'll introduce our presenters. We have Tyler Lunday today. He goes by pronouns he, him, Yolanda Gill Foster, she, her, and Pilana Belkin, she, her. So like I said, please enter any questions in the chat and send them to Q&A Rumyana, and we will go over any questions after each presenter and then at the end of all of the presentations as well. So without any ado, first up we have Tyler. Go ahead, Tyler, take it away.
All right, how's everybody doing today? It's good to be here. I feel really honored to be a part of this. Yeah, I really do. So my name's Tyler. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I struggled with substance use for many years and didn't really know that there was like a way out. A way of recovery. I had no idea what recovery was to begin with. Yeah, when I first realized that my use was getting problematic, I sought treatment, and a lot of those treatments were not really like what the words that we had talked about that popped up on the screen. Like there wasn't like a whole lot of compassionate care. I know that people cared, right? But like there wasn't a whole lot of alternative other than like complete abstinence. I remember I had an experience walking in to a treatment center and it was like, well, what's your favorite color, right? And he told me your favorite color and they gave you a Gatorade in that color, and it was like, all right, hold on, kid. Yeah, so I went through a couple different treatment centers and they offered these alternatives, and I tried a couple of them, right? Like I tried a couple of pathways when they all came to light to me, and a couple of them didn't work for me. But I kept on trying until I found one that did. And the one that worked for me was MAT Suboxone. Suboxone has been there. It was a big part of my recovery. I had the whole time that I was like seeking recovery as well. Like I was going to meetings, and like I had heard some stuff around like MAT or MAR, however you want to say it. And there was a lot of stigma surrounding those things because like a lot of these meetings that I was going to were preaching like complete and total abstinence. And I had heard, people talking about MAT, and and how if you were on MAT, you weren't abstinent, you know, and it was very stigmatizing, very excluding, and I kept it secret for a long time because like I felt like that internal shame, like that internal stigma. I'm like, oh, these people, they don't think that I'm really clean, or really in recovery, you know, because I used this to like aid me, and like Suboxone saved my life, man. It really did. Like, I don't know that I would be here today if it weren't for my pathway of recovery. So there was a lot of external stigma factors that I started to believe, you know, that really led me down a path of like guilt and shame. But like I wasn't gonna stop because like my pathway was improving the quality of my life. You know, like when I was out there using, my substance use led me to like a lot of places that I never thought that I would go, you know, and it wasn't all roses and sunshine. Um so you know, when the quality of my life started to improve because I was using Suboxone, I realized that like I had found something here, you know. Um and I kept on with it, and I stayed in treatment. I kept attending meetings because meetings were helpful to me as well. But like I had this secret, right? Like that I was taking Suboxone, and I had really not a whole lot of support, you know. There was a there was a long period of time where um I didn't have anybody to talk to. I couldn't be completely authentic about my pathway of recovery because I didn't feel supported in it, you know. Um then like I came to SOS after while I was in a treatment center. I was in a 90-day treatment center called Turning Point here in Dover, where I live. Well, I live in Barrington, which is right outside of Dover. But and I met Lena, who's here today. She was one of my biggest supporters, and like she created like a safe space for me to feel comfortable in my recovery, and SOS did as well. And like that was the first time I ever became like completely authentic about my pathway, and I felt supported. Um, it was awesome. She encouraged me, you know, to be okay with it. You know, she was really happy for me. And like everybody that I talked to that about it was too, you know, like I came to realize that like I wasn't alone, you know, and that was a big thing for me. Um, Peer-based recovery services that SOS provides, like we do like all recovery meetings here, which supports like any pathway of recovery, were really helpful for me in you know, feeling comfortable with myself and my pathway. Um, so I sustained like a couple of years, you know, in recovery. And Progress. After what's that? Oh, somebody said something. After a couple of years in recovery, I was still going to meetings, and like keeping that part. It was almost like I was living like a double life, to be honest with you, because like I had like these supports at SOS and in these all recovery meetings that were I could be completely authentic with. I also attended Mara meetings. I don't know if anybody's familiar with them. I found them online. That was cool. It's Medically Assisted Recovery Anonymous. Um, and so I found all these supports, and then like I was still going to meetings out in the community that were preaching complete and total abstinence. And so I was living like two lives, and like because like I wanted all the support I could get. Like I remember going through treatment, they were like, go to 90 meetings in 90 days, do this, do that. And like I took suggestions. I took like when I first came into recovery, I was so desperate to like improve the quality of my life and not go back to where I was, that like I was willing to do anything, right? And after a couple of years, like I started facing, and I started like I couldn't keep it in anymore, and I started being completely authentic about my pathway of recovery in these meetings. And like I faced a lot of stigma in those meetings too, from like 12-step fellowships. People said that like I couldn't chair meetings because I wasn't sending a clear message, you know. I couldn't hold service positions, I couldn't do step work, you know. Or when I talked to my sponsor about it, he was like, okay, so what's your plan for coming off of it? you know, and like that was his first question. And I was like not in a place where I was ready to come off of it. Like I had Suboxone was something that was helping me, right? Like I wasn't having cravings to go use. I wasn't being triggered, like there was still some external triggers and stuff, but like it improved the quality of my life. It helped me with some chronic pain, you know, that I had sustained in my active addiction. Um, COVID hit, right? And like I was still in recovery, and like I faced some more stigma, and then I had a tragedy occur in my life, and I found it necessary to go back out and use again after a couple of years. But I didn't use the substance that I didn't use the substance that Suboxone was helping me with. I used an alternative substance, right? And I was still going to my MAT provider, and there was stigma in the medical profession too. Like I remember having a conversation with my provider, and her being like, "Well, is this really working for you? We need to have a conversation because like you're still taking this, but you're using a different substance." And I was like, no, this is absolutely still helping me. I still need this in my life. I still need this so I don't go back to using, you know, X substance, you know, because like I realize that like I'm kind of like at a teetering point right here, and this is still helping me. You know, like I still know that like I can get back to where I was, but like I struggled with some trauma around a death in my family. And I remember in that moment that like I was so happy that I wasn't using the Suboxone, that I was using Suboxone because it was saving my life at that point in time, you know. And it saved my life multiple times. I came back into recovery. I stopped using the other substance, and you know, finally I reached out for support, and one of those supports was she's a supervisor here at SOS, and she helped me. She actually drove me to treatment once while I was, you know, while I was still actively using. There's another person on this call too that's a big support of my recovery, and like I finally like reached out to these people, and you know, sought the support that I needed again. I switched my method, if you will, with Suboxone. Instead of taking strips, I ended up going on the Sublocade shot, which was really helpful for me. It kind of like took away the hand to mouth thing, and like that was another change that I found that improved the quality of my life. And then I just became like more like at that point something happened. Like something happened. I had enough support in my life. I had enough support of people. I had come, you know, clean about what I was doing in the 12-step fellowship, and like started just like being okay with it, right? And like the steps that I took to be okay with it were like I sought support from peers, you know, that were coming, frequenting SOS. I was talking and I was being completely authentic. And like I said before, I found out I wasn't alone. I did a lot of counseling with like LADAX. I saw EMDR therapy, which was really helpful for me as well. I talked about it with coworkers. You know, I talked about it with my supervisors. We do a thing here every week at SOS, where we have supervision once a week, and like I used all these tools to like become okay with it. And then finally we did I remember when I came back to work here, they had a strength over stigma campaign. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but there was a lot of different pictures that they took about like you know, the LGBTQ community and the harm reduction community. And then like I went to my supervisor and I was like, I want to do something for Suboxone, because like I felt like it needed to be put out there that like it's okay, you know, like to reduce the stigma of being on MAT, you know. And like they took a picture of me leaning up against the wall and with a graffiti that said Suboxone saved my life. And because it did, yeah, and like they put it out there, and like it was no longer a secret, right? Like that secret is dead now, you know. And I think that like when that secret of mine got brought to light was when like I started becoming okay with my pathway completely. Um Today, like I share my experience with people, you know. I use what I went through to like stop the stigma from people who are utilizing this pathway, because I know how effective it is, you know. So like I can be compassionate for those people. um I started sharing my experience openly in 12-step programs. And like today, like I used the Sublocade shot, and like I'm no longer on Suboxone, but like I used that experience to share with people um how it helped me in my life, you know. Um I'm transparent about it to everybody, and like I help people access Suboxone clinics and treatments when they're looking for that kind of support. And I don't know, it feels good. Like I wouldn't change a thing. You know, I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't change the choices that I've made for my pathway. Um, because like I know that it saved my life. Like by all rights, I shouldn't be here. You know, I shouldn't be sitting in front of you guys telling you my story. But I am, and it's because of Suboxone. And yeah, I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful for the pathway that I took, and I thank you guys for letting me take some time today. So
Thank you so much, Tyler. And Tyler, I am so sorry. I asked you for an introduction and then I blew right past it. So Tyler actually works for SOS as a criminal justice peer recovery specialist. I want to make sure I get that right. He's also a CRSW, and SOS actually has syringe services there as well now, right?
yeah,
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 which is so great. And I heard that it's going swimmingly. All right. So thank you so much for sharing that, and congrats on your recovery journey. You know, the more we the more we share this, the more we take away the power of stigma over harm reduction and MAT Suboxone. So let's see, let's go to Rumiana real quick. Was there any questions or comments, Rumi?
Yes, there is. There's a couple. Tyler, beautiful story. Thank you for sharing. Let's see. The first question is, did you feel because you were on MAT, it was difficult for you to go to your support network within 12-step fellowship when you were finding that you were heading back to problematic drug use?
yeah, absolutely. So at that point in time, like I said, like COVID hit, there were no meetings, like everything was online. And I just didn't reach out because like I still wasn't being completely authentic with those people, you know, because of the stigma, because I felt shame, because I didn't want them to say like, okay, like, what are we gonna do? I didn't want to be told that I had to get off of it. You know what I mean? Because that's not cool. Like we shouldn't shame anybody for their pathway, you know. And I felt like that's what that was gonna happen. So it was really hard for me to connect and reach out to people that were in a 12-step fellowship, because I know that stigma exists there, you know.
Thank you. The rest are a lot of thank yous and a bunch of hearts.
Awesome. Thank you, Rumiana. All right, so we will move on to our next presenter. And like I said, in the meantime, if you think of any questions that you want to ask Tyler, we'll also revisit those at the end of all the presentations as well. So keep the questions coming to Rumiana. All right, so next we have Yolanda. Yolanda is a state certified CRSW, pronouns are she, her. Yolanda co-facilitates the Parent Cafe and works with the Parenting Information Center and Parenting Journey in Recovery. She's also serves as a board member with the Children's Trust as well. To further her education, she's also completed the Building Futures Together program at UNH and is currently a full-time student at Granite State College. So Yolanda, I will pass it off to you.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. Thank you to first of all, I'd like to thank the community of practice for allowing me this honor. I would love to share my story. I think that it is important, just like Tyler said. So methadone assisted treatment, that's what I chose for my pathway. And I'm going to introduce myself and give you my methadone assisted treatment experience, and then I'm going to close. So my name is Yolanda Gill Foster, and I have 4 children, 3 boys and a girl, 2 dogs, and I have a husband who has 2 daughters of his own. I am a CRSW with Archways. I just recently got married October 9th, so yay. So when I was first introduced to methadone, I was living in Families in Transition, FIT is what we called it, in Manchester, New Hampshire. I was trying to be the best mom that I could be at the time. And at the time, I only had custody of my daughter. So the decision to go in on methadone was really not mine, if I'm being entirely honest. I was in a program, the program Families in Transition FIT is a program that helps families learn how to live again, right, with each other and build their family relationships and reunite with family members, whether it's children, moms, dads, aunts, uncles, any family members. Provided a roof over your head. You did IOP, you did NA meetings, they had activities for myself and my kids to do together and separately, counseling for myself and my daughter. It was really, really helpful for me at the time. There was random drug screenings. That was the hard part because I could not maintain my abstinence from using my drug of choice, my DOC. So my peer support worker had to tell me that I needed to do something about it. I kept getting positive drug screens, and I either had to go on medically assisted treatment, MAT, or get kicked out of where I was. And at the time, I had no idea what medically assisted treatment was. So the treatment plan, the methadone, it was a treatment that you take daily. So you go and you get what they call dosed daily. And they distributed it to you, and it was covered by your insurance. The Suboxone was a medication that you received, and it was in a prescription form. And you did not need to go in every day and get dosed, and it was covered by insurance-ish. So the positives is I was allowed to stay at the house, right? I did not have to pay out of pocket, and I wouldn't have to worry about going out and trying to find the next one, right? My next fix, so that I wouldn't have withdrawals and I could function in my daily life. I knew nothing about it. That was the negative, right? I did not have I was not sure if I had the right insurance or not. Was I required to pay out of pocket? I had no idea. I did not have a vehicle to get to my medication and dose every day. And if I did choose methadone, I couldn't leave out of the area, right? So those were my positive and my negatives with methadone. And my choice for the methadone maintenance plan was simply made because I was told I had to, or I had to leave the programming and everything that I was working so hard towards. I was scared to get on methadone because I had heard horrible stories about it. I had heard methadone was not a medically assisted treatment. I heard it was just another form to get high. I heard that you were in what they called, quote unquote, liquid handcuffs. So, and I had also been taking Suboxone on the street, right? And that was my way of getting, being substance free. Like, I'm not using, I'm taking Suboxone. Like, Suboxone is prescribed to people who want a better way of life, like Tyler was saying, and I was finding that, right? And I was finding it on the street, but apparently that wasn't acceptable. So not being really too familiar with the whole methadone, right? And ultimately I did go on methadone because of cost. At the time I did not have insurance, and methadone was cheaper than Suboxone. So yeah, so that's what I ended up going on, just so I could stay where I was, um, for myself and my daughter. And I was trying to rebuild my relationship with my son, who I didn't have custody of at the time. Methadone saved my life, like Tyler was saying, even though I had been torn with my decision about it, right? I felt it was best to maintain everything that I worked so hard for. And by doing that, I had to choose to go on medically assisted treatment. At the time, again, my story is a lot like Tyler's. I was in the 12-step fellowship program, right? And I had a sponsor. And in the 12-step fellowship program, I was shunned, and I felt like I had to keep it a secret, just like Tyler said, right? And 12-step abstinent-based program is an honest program. And when I was on methadone, I didn't feel like I was working an honest program. So like, how can you, in my mind, it was, how can I get better if I'm not working the program the way that it's laid out, right? And my sponsor's reaction when she did find out that I was on methadone was the reason why I was keeping it a secret, like Tyler said. I really wanted to start working on my step work, 1 to 12, and my sponsor told me that I wasn't allowed to do that while I was on medically assisted treatment. So I just felt like I couldn't work an honest program. My head was down, you know what I mean? Like I felt shameful. I felt like people would ask, what's your deal? What's her deal, or what's his deal? And as soon as, you know, the predecessors found out that you were on methadone or Suboxone, they were like, you know, and that was kind of what I got out of it. I never really felt like it was stigmatizing, except for the 12-step program. And when I became pregnant with my son, who's now 10 years old, he was the last baby that I had. I felt guilt and shame, and they ate at me all the time. I was worried and concerned that my baby was going to have withdrawal symptoms. And then, of course, when I'm pregnant with my son and I'm on MAT, methadone, and I'm looking at videos of babies detoxing and withdrawing, I felt horrible. You know, it felt even worse. And I could not get off the methadone when I was pregnant, because if I got off the methadone while I was pregnant, I could have lost the baby, or I could have hurt the baby. So what was even crazier is that they upped the methadone dose while I was pregnant, because the baby takes half of it. When the healthcare providers found out that I was on methadone, they didn't have to say anything. Their facial expressions changed along with their attitudes. I felt it. I felt the shame. I felt how can I do this to my baby? He was an innocent bystander. I would cry about it. I would, really, there was no one I could turn to, like Tyler said, because I couldn't go to anyone in the 12-step fellowship program, and I couldn't go to my sponsor at the time. I struggled with judgment and guilt and shame, and it all went hand in hand, right? So I felt stuck. I didn't know what to do. After my baby was born, he did not go through 1 ounce of withdrawal symptoms. So that was a miracle. Higher power is what I believe. But I wanted to make a change, right? So for me, I wanted to make a change, and I wanted to stop utilizing the methadone program, because I started getting to a point where I wasn't doing it the way it was laid out. I did when I first started it, but then I started abusing it and taking other things with it so I could get even more wasted. So as the stress of being a mom and not really working an honest program and having a new baby and trying to reunite with my other children, I was now abusing the methadone along with other things that I did alongside of the methadone. And literally, like Tyler said, it took me to want to come out of it and come off of methadone. If I came off of the methadone when other people wanted me to, and I would have listened to their opinions about it, I definitely felt like I would have personally almost guaranteed had a reoccurrence for sure. If I wasn't ready and I did it when everybody else wanted me to, I definitely would have had some serious issues, and I probably wouldn't be alive today, you know? And methadone did, it saved my life. And it was logical enough for me in my head to realize when I was using it for the right reasons and when I was abusing it, right? So I was learning different tools, and because I wasn't out there hustling anymore, right? So like I was getting up every day and I was just living a better life, right? And I had my daughter and I was trying to reunite with my son. And so things started improving for me. So I started getting that self-awareness in my mind, right? So when I decided to get off methadone, it was a decision I made for myself. I had gone to my sponsor, who I was with on and off for 10 years, and I had said, the second half of my life, I want to look different. And she said, and you can. And I was like, everyone says that, right? So, and I did. I did things entirely different, and I changed. I really turned everything around. I completely changed it. I decided that for me, my way wasn't treatment. That was because I'm stubborn. I don't recommend it for some people, but for me, I didn't choose treatment. I just detoxed for 4 months, medically detoxed for 4 months. And when I started feeling myself again, I started doing little by little by little by little, right? Here and there to improve my quality of life. And today, what I choose to do for my recovery is I choose a 12-step abstinence program. That's me. I just don't think for me anything works. I end up abusing it, and I'm self-aware of that today. You know, even you know, alcohol, I never had a problem with alcohol, right? So I stopped taking drugs and I started drinking and drinking a lot of alcohol until it became a problem. So for me, that's what I choose to do. I choose to use the 12-step fellowship program as an abstinent base for my recovery. And after having the same sponsor for 10 years on and off, I thought it was time for me to move on with a new sponsor. So I chose somebody entirely different than myself. The growth that I have accumulated throughout the years has been phenomenal. I have 5 years substance free. Last year I closed on a house. I have relationships with every single one of my kids back. This phenomenal job. You know, my life started coming back together again. So I believe in MAT treatment. Even though I had my own personal issues, I can also say that at one point in my life, it was the only way that I was able to move forward in my recovery, right? There is so much more that people know and are being educated about MAT today. So currently, again, I have 5 years substance free. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Yolanda, so much. This is just such a great story. And congrats on your recovery. I think the main things, a lot of obviously every story is not the same, but I see some similarities from other folks I've spoken to too. And, you know, recovery is not one set in stone definition, you know, like it's different for everyone. And on top of that, I mean, I think this is maybe in my humble opinion, but forced change never works across the board. You have to want to make the change yourself. Let's see here. So let me jump over to Rumiana. Are there any questions for Yolanda?
No question is in the chat, but I did see a lot of reactions, and congratulations on all of your success.
So awesome.
Thank you.
All right. And again, if you have questions that you think of for Yolanda and Tyler, as our last presenter is speaking, please throw the questions in and send them over to Rumiana. Thank you so much, Yolanda. So we will go over to Palana, certainly last but not least. Palana goes by she, her pronouns. She is the Director of Operations at the New Hampshire Harm Reduction Coalition. Her extensive policy and organizing work in New Hampshire has included work with the ACLU of New Hampshire, serving as the Rochester City Councilor, and as a board member of the New Hampshire Women's Foundation and 603 Forward. She started at the Harm Reduction Coalition in care coordination before moving on to operations this summer. So go ahead, Palana. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. To Tyler and Yolanda, the stories were amazing. Thank you for sharing. So I'm going to share just a tiny bit about myself, but mostly throughout this, I'm going to give, like in those last two stories, we heard a little bit more about MAT, which are both forms of harm reduction. And I'll just be talking about what is harm reduction, what are small ways that it can be applied as a lens to different kind of work, and just the legality of it, because it is becoming more of a conversation. And I think a lot of people are looking to understand, what can I do? What can my organization do or support that's involved in this? So yeah, Palana Belkin, she, her. I feel like I just throughout my life, trying to think, where do I want to start with it? Maybe I'll start with the it was a couple of years ago, and my dad pointed out to me. So I graduated from high school like 15 or 16 years ago, and he was pointing out that there's more people that I went to high school with that have passed away than ones that he went to high school with. Like he's in his 60s, and it's remarkable to think, like most of them were some type of overdose or unintentional poisoning. There's also, on my other side of the family, there was a family member that was lost. And when I was growing up, they were always saying that it was due to drugs. It was due to drugs that this family member passed away. And then you find out that the family member didn't necessarily die of drug use, but of the stigma and the conditions that surrounded their drug use, and the shame that, was kind of programmed into them. So harm reduction, when it came onto my radar a few years ago, there's a few different parts, whether it's looking at just people that I grew up with that I lost to fentanyl, or, like thinking of 30, 40 years back, this thing in my mom's family. Harm reduction is really easy for me to support and get behind. So yeah, we can take it to the next slide. So just a little bit about NHHRC for those who haven't heard us. Our mission is to promote compassionate care for people who use drugs through harm reduction by supporting syringe service programs, utilizing best practices, and advocating for human rights. And the vision of it is to transform New Hampshire to embrace and empower people who use drugs. Go to the next slide. Yep. So how do we actually do that? Some of the stuff that we do. So around access, we help set up and support New Hampshire syringe service programs with training, technical assistance, funding, and data analysis. So we operate quite a few syringe exchanges ourselves, but then we also grant out to other people and help organizations, kind of stand up their own services. We promote and expand harm reduction services, including syringe access, anywhere that we can, really. Through engagement, we advance evidence-based practices. So a lot of harm reduction is based in just studies showing empirically this is a practice that works. Building alliances across sectors that serve people who use drugs, empowering people who use drugs and their communities. So what that means too is that we're working with a lot of people who might be getting supplies or information from us. Maybe we're noticing trends as we're distributing the syringes about like overdoses or people needing extra doses of Narcan and stuff like that. And we're able to tell people and empower them, give them the tools that they need to navigate that risk, kind of right there in the moment. And ultimately, as part of all of this, rights and dignity. So advocating for harm reduction and policies that affect the lives of people who use drugs, as well as encouraging the voices of those with lived advocacy or lived experience through self-advocacy. So for those who have not necessarily thought about harm reduction before, I always like to point out that it's something that kind of happens. This is something that we practice almost everywhere. For a majority of us, the sun, a little bit too much sun, you're going to get lobstered. You're going to be totally red. So, but it doesn't stop people from going to the beach in the summer. They just have to take extra steps, whether it's an umbrella or putting on sunscreen. So those are forms of harm reduction. You know, driving a car at 55, 65 miles an hour can be a really scary thing if you think about, you know, just your body in motion. But there's things like airbags and seat belts that help reduce that risk of harm if something were to happen. In this final photo here of a helmet, a little football player, maybe hockey player. I'm not a sport human, so I'm not totally sure. But you know, like throwing yourself into that fight, whatever that sport is, could be really dangerous. But you know, there's elbow pads, there's helmets, there are things that help reduce the harms associated with it. So with the harm reduction movement and NHHRC, we take those principles of acknowledging, you know, hey, going to the beach might be risky. Going to drive a car has risks. Playing this sport has risks, but there's some things that you can do to minimize or nearly eliminate the risks that are, you know, those negative consequences. Next slide. Yeah, harm reduction, set of practical strategies aimed at reducing negative consequences associated with drug use. So here in this photo, you'll see these are all things that we distribute at our exchanges. We have sharps containers. We have some safe use kits there. So, you know, it's not just the syringes, it's sterile water so that, you know, if someone doesn't use water from, you know, like a less than ideal source. Cookers, because if somebody's syringe is, you know, there's an infection risk, a cooker is going to carry that too. Tourniquets, cottons, making sure that people are able to have something fresh and clean for every shot, and you know, make sure that they have enough rigs to do so. Next slide. Yeah, so obviously, in order to make that kind of stuff happen, there is a social justice movement element of it that generally respects the rights of people who use drugs. There's a lot of kind of legal landscape, which I'm going to talk about in a second, that had to change in order to make it so that, you know, Narcan is something that everyone can have and that people other than pharmacists can distribute a syringe. Overall harm reduction, it accepts that drug use is part of the world, and rather than to, you know, say like, you need to figure it out on your own, you need to keep it private, you need to not share people, you know, like that experience that I think Tyler was talking about, where you're like trying to like separate yourself into two different people. This is to hopefully have it so that people, you know, like when this mentality is truly there and you make people feel safe and respected in their care, they're able to acknowledge that, you know, that just lost my train of thought, but we're working to minimize that harm. We're not packing it away. I'm sure people have seen similar things to this kind of diagram here. Harm reduction, it understands that drug use is complex. There's a continuum of behavior. There's some ways of using a drug that might be safer than others. And ultimately, it's a non-judgmental approach to empower drug users to share information and support one another. Go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is how we ended up where we are. This is something that, you know, 10 years ago, we wouldn't be able to do the operation that we do now. And that's because of a couple key changes to state law. So in 2017, there was a bill that was signed that authorized the operation of syringe service programs. And what that means is that there were laws that made it so that, you know, like only pharmacists could distribute syringes, and there would be like a strict system too of keeping track of how many were going out with each prescription or whatnot. And this made it so that anyone, literally anyone, could decide that they would like to distribute syringes, and then it creates a process for registering with the state, where, you know, kind of we end up like the NHA HRC, we send a report to the state every 4 months, just saying kind of like, here was our in number, our out number, naloxone distributed out there. And now, this is 5 years later, there are 10 registered syringe service programs operating in New Hampshire. So I have a couple of their logos here. Hand Up kind of focuses on the Stratford County area, so Dover, Rochester, Somersworth, Queen City. Exchange is in Manchester. Mount Washington Valley is, I can't remember what town it's in, but it's up in Mount Washington Valley. Grow down in Nashua, which is now Revive Syringe Services. The HIV HCV Resource Center. Yeah, so now we have 10 different, and SOS, which is really great. On to the next slide. Yeah, so the legislation expanded who could distribute hypodermic syringes to persons other than pharmacists, or so that it could be distributed by people other than pharmacists and locations other than pharmacies. Distributing syringes to people under the age of 18 without a prescription is still prohibited. Syringe service programs under state law, they're authorized to provide sterile syringes, syringe disposal services, provide naloxone, other drug prescription equipment, and proactive harm reduction education. So we register, like I said, yearly with the Department of Health and Human Services, and we're responsible for reporting data on a quarterly basis. Some of the other supplies that we're allowed to distribute under the law, we're able to distribute some like clean smoking supplies are part of that. Fentanyl test strips are part of that as well. Syringe service programs, they are prohibited from operating within drug-free school zones. An exception to this prohibition may be granted by the applicable school district, school board when a request is initiated by an SSP. Though the one example of somewhere that this was done is, I believe it was in Claremont, where they allowed the syringe service program to operate. I forget at what point, but it was a building that they had access to that was within that 1,000 feet. Drug-free school zones defined within 1,000 feet of all property and equipment used for school purposes, including but not limited to school playgrounds and buses of any public or private elementary, secondary, vocational school, or Head Start facility. This is really key because you know, I don't know, like thinking about like a city like Manchester, for example, we have a map that gets in, because there are so many different private schools, public schools in that city, that it's like almost like half the city ends up being places that we're not able to do an exchange. And then there's some other cities where it's not that big of a deal, and it doesn't, you know, like in Rochester, I think all the schools fall on a pretty small radius, and most of the city is still somewhat open for that. One of the other key things that law that happened in 2017 changed, it makes it so that participants in a syringe service program may possess a residual amount of a controlled drug in a syringe, which under state law is defined as a unusable amount of a controlled substance in or on a hypodermic syringe or needle. In places where syringe or needle possession is prohibited, possession is a misdemeanor offense, but being part of an SSP is an affirmative defense, meaning that if the person charged with unlawfully possessing a syringe proves they're participant in an SSP, by a preponderance of the evidence, they should not be convicted. Ultimately, all of that is a fancy way of saying that SSP participants should be able to carry syringes to an exchange without the fear of being prosecuted. Yeah, and then, so I talked a little bit about the principles, a little bit about how harm reduction stuff works under the law here in New Hampshire. How do we deliver that service here? So harm reduction can happen in a number of different ways. It can be in a brick and mortar location. That's an example of, the Revive location in Nashua. I think the Keen Grow service does fixed site stuff. SOS does fixed site, where people can come in and get harm reduction stuff. And then there's like temporary structure, mobile kind of stuff. So temporary structure is, we used to do this in Manchester where it was a very big operation. We used to do one exchange every week, and you'd get like 200 people over the course of 90 minutes. And it was so wild, just how quickly it would all happen. And we ended up breaking it up into several smaller ones. So rather than doing this once a week, 90-minute thing, we, over 3 different days, go to a couple different spots, and see the same volume of people, but everyone gets a little bit better quality of care. But we used to pop up with, like the pop-up tents and stuff, and that was kind of like a temporary structure thing where people would step under and get their stuff. But mobile, I would say, is kind of like the most common way that we see it happen here in New Hampshire. So again, SOS does a mobile service. In Manchester, we have a van. We pop up a couple times a week in different spots. I think Concord is doing some kind of mobile stuff right now. I know up in Claremont, that's mobile based. And I think Nashua does quite a bit of mobile stuff too. And that's just having a van or a car and popping up. And especially when you don't have a location, that can be an advantage even, to be able to pop up as a syringe service program, and people wouldn't necessarily understand what's going on because it's just a couple of people standing outside of cars with the doors open maybe. So there's pros and cons to all of these. Home delivery happens in some areas. It would be cool to see that happen a little bit more often, but there are some people who aren't able to, make it out to a public spot or something like that. They don't have transit. And just being able to bring it right to them, to their door, sometimes, without interacting with them even. There was one person when I was a care coordinator, I can recall, where sometimes I wouldn't even see them, but we would work it out, where I'd drop off stuff or take something with me. Street outreach methods, that's, going out, in a backpack in a high traffic area, or, in a well-known tending site. That's something I see a little bit more in the middle of the state, Concord, Manchester. I don't see it as much on the outside. And mail order and secondary exchange, I think, are really exciting. So there's nothing to stop someone from within the state of New Hampshire mailing somebody some Narcan or fentanyl test strips or something, and sometimes we get those requests. And it's great. And then secondary exchange was what I was talking about, where like maybe we see someone once a week, they come to the exchange and they bring all their friends' stuff. So, they'll bring back 300 syringes, get a whole bunch of, like fresh cases of it, and then they redistribute it to the friends that gave them the syringes. And that's something that, especially I feel like in the Tri-City, Stratford County area, as well as Manchester, we have people who do that, for their friends or loved ones, or, sometimes people even come for somebody else. They'll come to say, it's like, I want them to have clean syringes and Narcan, and, I know that they'll use it if I come and take care of it. So secondary exchange is a very valid way. And all this can depend on the area that you're into. There's some areas that are friendlier for maybe a brick and mortar kind of thing. Some areas, mobile's the right way to do it. Some street outreach. So lots of different ways to incorporate those services and get services out to people. And this is just a little diagram. I think this might be my last slide, but just showing how, syringe access, we have it kind of in the middle of this circle thing here. you know, like at the syringe exchange, there is some low hanging fruit where we're able to kind of get sterile injection supplies, safer injection information, maybe a basic referral, safe sex stuff too. We always have, you know, like condoms and lube, and now there's starting to be quite a bit of Plan B available too, and we're able to get those out to people. But through care coordination, which is, again, that's how I kind of came into NHHRC, and there's quite a few care coordinators working still for NHHRC. They're able to like be there for some crisis intervention stuff, wound care, which sometimes is a referral out, sometimes it's you know, like bringing special supplies for someone. There's also times where there's one person who was being very stubborn about one of the worst injuries I've ever seen. And I start for 2 or 3 weeks. I got a nurse to come with me so that he could get that care right there on the spot. HCV and HIV testing, mostly referrals in New Hampshire, but sometimes we are able to get the at-home HIV tests, which are great. Opiate overdose prevention, health insurance in enrollment, and from there, you know, you get some medical case management as well as some non-medical stuff. So it's just people who needed a little bit of help figuring out where they're going or with some services, and then there's some people who you're, you know, really watching out for because they might be at higher risk of overdose. And when you provide these services to people, from my experience working in it, it's like they open up to you so much, and they trust that they can share, like that they're just being honest about, you know, even if maybe they have been using, they're honest about it, and they just bring their full self, and then you're able to kind of fill in all these gaps and stuff. So, and then I think that's the end of my, yeah.
Oh.
So, so that's just a little bit about harm reduction, both how it works here, the legal mechanisms, how I've seen it kind of play out and stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alana. And NHHRC, love them. They were like my first learning experience coming into drug user health and syringe services world and harm reduction. So between Carrie and Lauren over there, they've taught me so much. And now I'm just, you know, anywhere in a meeting at the state, Rumiana can probably attest, I'm like, harm reduction, what are we doing for drug user health? The other things I just wanted to mention, as I used to oversee the data from the SSPs over at the Bureau of Infectious Disease Control, and I just thought I'd bring up a couple of things. And I'll preface this by saying, even during COVID, the access and syringes obtained, distributed, it only went up during COVID. So these numbers come from that. This is between July 2020 and June 2021. There was an 82% increase in syringes distributed, 98% increase in syringes collected and disposed, and then a 23% increase in naloxone kit distribution. And that's before SOS and the doorway in Wentworth. So it's awesome. I can't wait to see the numbers. They should be even better this year.
Totally. And I think that really big jump in numbers that you're talking about, that was when Manchester happened, because that's by far the biggest exchange in the state, and that like tripled our numbers.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah. And I know there's been, you know, some stuff happening in Manchester, but I'm so glad to see that y'all are still out there, and because there are folks that need it, Manchester for sure. Let's see. So before I get too ahead of myself here, just wanted to go to Rumiana. Were there any questions or anything for Palana?
No questions, but there was some information I'd like to share with everyone. It is known people can access condoms, lube, and HIV self-test kits through HIV Planning Group website at nhhiv.org.
And we can send that out too when we send
Yes.
the email addresses for our presenters today. And then I can also add a link for the annual report for the SSPs if everyone's interested, just to see the numbers. And I mean, the numbers from last year came from 8 SSPs, and I mean, they've only gone up since then. So, all right. Rumiana, any other questions for the rest of the presenters before we finish up here?
Not that I can see, but I also want to remind everyone that you can unmute yourself and just ask directly.
Absolutely. So if while I'm talking or while I pass it off to Stephen and Mana, if you think of something you want to just chime in, we're totally great with that. And, you know, some questions some folks don't think of until afterwards. Again, we'll send out the email addresses. I think I speak on behalf of the group. We're all happy to answer questions related to this. So let's see here. So Stephen, if you don't mind popping up there you go. There's their contact information there. And again, we'll send this out as well if you don't have time to jot this down. Let's see here. So I think that pretty much wraps everything up. Again, come off mute if you have any questions, and I'm going to pass it back to Stephen and Mana, and we'll do our prize wheel.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Chrissy, Rumiana, and thank you to our 3 guest speakers as well. We really appreciate your input into our community of practice today. So just before we finish up, we'd like to encourage everybody to visit nhtac.org. This is a site where you can find out about up-and-coming communities of practice. You can register for future events. You can also see recordings of previous communities of practice, and yeah, we enjoy your continued involvement here. And one thing that we're very interested in is getting your feedback. I'm going to go ahead and paste into the chat here for all of you an evaluation link. We would really appreciate you taking the time to fill in this evaluation link. We're interested in making this as relevant as possible for you. So please share your thoughts very honestly with us. If you have any suggestions for future subjects that you would like to see looked into, then please go ahead and mention that there too. And as I say, we welcome all of your feedback. So to conclude, as we have hyped up sufficiently from the start of this event, we're going to enjoy a raffle here. So we're going to ask for Mana's help. And let me just go ahead and switch over here. Okay, I believe you should all be able to see our raffle now. So if you could go ahead, Mana, and we'll find out who our first winner is. Okay, so the first winner is number 8, Dan. So Dan, what I'd like to ask you to do, if you can find in the chat or in the participant list, Raffle Mana Rose, if you could send her your address, we will send out your gift in the post. So congratulations, Dan, very well done.
This is so, thank you.
Fantastic, thanks, Dan. Okay, Mana, can we have our second winner, please? Okay, number 6, Astrid. Congratulations, Astrid. We lost the same view. Please, can you send your address to Raffle Mana Rose, and we'll get your gift, your prize in the post. Brilliant. And we have one more lucky winner. So when you're ready, Mana, we'll go ahead and spin one more time. And we have number 4, Andrea. Well done, Andrea. And just the same for you. Please go ahead and will you send your address to Raffle Mana Rose, please, and we'll have your prizes in the post at our earliest opportunity. So once again, thank you to all of you for being present today. We appreciate your input. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you at our next community of practice.